Okay, so we are live, and hello everyone. I hope you all are doing great. My name is Oindrila, and I hope I have become a very familiar face by now. But again, a brief introduction to Vantier. I'm a third year CS undergrad student who believes in learning by doing, and I'm the GDSC lead at my campus, Dr. Sudhir Chandrashur Institute of Technology, and along with that, I'm a part of different global communities such as Google Cloud, Microsoft, Postman, and also Google DSC, of course, which helps me in learning tech as well as making valuable professional connections. If you wish to stay connected with me, find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Instagram. Just search Oindrila Das and you'll be able to find me easily. Uh, so we have started Flutter Festivals on 9th March with full of enthusiasm to learn something new. And we have had so many great speakers along the way who has helped us in learning through various hands-on workshops. And I'm sure that these sessions were very much helpful for you all. But as obvious as it sounds, all the good things end too soon. So, with a heavy heart, I'm announcing that today is the last session of Flutter Festivals. See how time flies. Okay, so enough of talking. Now, let's focus on today's session as we have Mr. Roman Jaka, sir. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Okay, so sir is a Google developer expert in Flutter as well as a Google certified cloud architect who loves sharing his passion for Flutter with the wider developer community. He's also a lead organizer at GDG Lawrence, as well as a GDG mentor for the Northeast in the USA with 10 plus years of experience as a software engineer. And he enjoys spreading the word about the best practices in the industry regarding mobile, web, and cloud. So, in this session, Sir will walk us through a hands on workshop on how to implement state management in Flutter without over engineering your app, but achieving the goal of separating the business logic of your application from the UI rendering logic. So, we will be learning about inherited widgets using core elements of the framework as well as the provider package to accomplish this goal. So, I would like to welcome Sir um, and let me present the screen as well.
Great. Thank you so much for that great introduction. Just wanted to say, I'm humbled to be here. I am so honored for to be invited here. Share my knowledge about Flutter and especially some of the one of the most debatable topics and complex topics, which is state management. But I'm gonna make it so easy for you guys that you would be able to implement it. So again, like you said, I am Roman. I am a Flutter GDE. I am also a Google certified cloud architect. And just like you, I am also a lead organizer at my own community called GDG Lawrence here in Lawrence, Massachusetts. So I'm really pleased to be here. I just wanted to also thank everybody who's joining this session, and I hope that you learned a lot. So I am going to start right away. And again, just wanted to say thank you one more time. But yes, I'm going to be doing a very hands-on session. So those of you who would love to follow along would be able to do so. And I will be sharing that information along as well. So I am going to proceed. Yes, so these are some of my social media channels where you can find me. If you scan the QR code at the corner, you can follow me on Twitter, where I publish a lot about the events that I hold with the community, not only as a Flutter GDE, but as a passionate developer in general. So I have a YouTube channel also where I post videos about the things that I've been doing in Flutter, best practices and whatnot. Also, I do Twitch live streaming. I'll be doing live streamings again. I used to do it a lot, but now I'm going to get back on that again. That way you can interact with me in live sessions just like this one. You can visit me also on my portfolio site, Roman Just Codes. and then you can see like the applications that I've built and a lot of the things that I've put out there for the community. And last but not least, like I mentioned, you can follow me on Twitter at drcoders by scanning the QR code on your screens. So I am going to continue. And for those of you who just joined or you're wonder why are we here? Well, we are here because of Flutter. Flutter is Google's UI toolkit for developing natively compiled, beautiful interfaces using a single code base targeting multiple platforms. So you can target mobile, embedded, desktop, web, but you have to be able to build these applications in a very robust way, implementing clean architectures, providing great a great infrastructure and a good foundation, so that you can build great applications to delight your users. So I just wanted a quick prompt from the folks in the chat, or if you want to share. So what do you like to focus on? Just very small prompt for the audience, like after work or studies in your case. So what do you like to do? Do you you can just leave in the chat a whichever number that applies to you. For example, +1 if you are working on a side project like after your studies, or you could put number 2 if you just like to relax, you don't like to do coding after you do your studies, or you do a little bit of both or other things. So in my particular case, I love to do a very good balance. Like after work, I engage on side projects, but hey, I also like to have fun. I like to learn about other things. So yes, I'm glad that a lot of people are more on the a little bit of both, because it's very healthy to keep a good balance. Like you just want to, you work on a side project, but you also do other things, which is pretty good. The same thing with me. I am engaged like in a bunch of apps, developed on the side, because hey, I also want to, build like my own startup and stuff like that. But it's just because I'm really passionate about coding that I like to do that. So I'm glad that some of you also at the same time like to do that. So thank you very much for those of you in there to share also, what you do after work or after your studies. Thank you so much. Let me just continue. And this is now how you will participate in this Flutter workshop. So I am going to be dropping right now this this link for the Flutter state management. This is a code lab that I custom created for this session, for these type of sessions, so I can engage with all of you. I'm going to drop it in the chat. And Andrila will be able to grab it and put it in the chat for you guys. So this link that I've dropped, you will be able to access it right now. Is a code lab for this session about state management. Also, I have other workshops that you can do, which I will also now drop the link for. It's actually off of my portfolio, a series of other code labs if you want to engage in learning Flutter. And I have other types of other types of sessions in there, other like for beginners, more for beginners, also intermediate, and also advanced. If you're up for doing that type of learning, like you want to learn, you want to step up your game in Flutter, you can find some of those code labs that I've put together, again with a lot of love for the community, so that you also can learn. Great. So make sure that you are in that link that I'm showing on the screen, and you will be using Dartpad to follow along if you want to do it with me. So the topic that we're going to be discussing today is state. So what is state? So state is any data that you need in order to rebuild your UI at any moment in time. So like the great Chris Sells puts it, he used to be in the Flutter team, but he used to say that state management is just that state that you just want to share between two widgets without them knowing about each other. So the way that you persist state is actually outside of the widget, and that's what we're going to be referring to as application state. Or if you just want to maintain state within a single widget, that is what's called ephemeral state. So these are the two type of states that we're going to be discussing today, and you will be learning about it at the end of this session. I guarantee it that you will have the right tools and the right knowledge to go out there and build great and robust applications with very simple ways on how to manage state in your applications. So yes, so we're going to be talking about the two types of states, which are ephemeral state, which is kind of like the simple state that you keep within a single widget, and you will learn about that in a minute. And application state, which is state that is not ephemeral, that you want to share across many parts of your application, and you're going to be learning that also here. So enough talking. Now let's start coding, because that's exactly why we are here. So I will invite you all to, either you can keep like a separate tab if you want to continue watching, but open another tab with Dartpad.dev. Dartpad.dev is that web-based editor in Flutter that you can immediately start learning Flutter without having to install anything. You don't have to install anything. You just go to Dartpad.dev and you can start coding. So let me just get out of this presentation. Now I'm going to show you how we're going to be doing that. So this is the code lab. That's one of the first the links that I've provided. And thank you, yes, for providing the link to Dartpad.dev. So Dartpad.dev, like I mentioned, is this web-based IDE that or Flutter text editor that allows you to build like Flutter applications right here. And then you can just grab this code, and then if you want, you can use it to publish your own applications if you want to. So I like the. Let me show you real quick how Dartpad works, like how you can launch it. So make sure that you go to Dartpad.dev, and then you're here in this web-based Flutter editor. At the top of the screen, if this is the first time you've been here, you will find this new pad button. So you click on that new pad button, the top left corner, right next to the logo. You click on new pad, and then here you can either pick Dart or you can pick Flutter. So make sure that you select Flutter, and then you click create. So I'm gonna click on create, and then you get a brand new pad. It's like a little bit of a sandbox for you to like do coding on the browser. Then every time that you want to test your application, then you click run, and then when you click run, this is just like a little bit of boilerplate code that Dartpad gives you initially. But here, then you will see the code, how it just shows as you're making changes, as if you were like in Visual Studio Code and all of that. So are we ready to proceed? Yes, thank you guys. Oh, Anurag, yeah, I think I've seen you before. Yes. Thank you again for joining. Thank you so much. So all of you guys here, thank you so much for joining. And please follow along. And thank you again for joining. So now let's proceed. This is this is the code lab that we're gonna follow along. Again, like I said, I put it together again just so that you can see how I build it, how I implement state management in my own applications. Like all the applications that I've published out there are using the state management that I'm going to be showing you here. So I'm going to be giving you the crown jewels, because I like to implement my things, my applications in a very easy way, and I like to share that with everybody. So let's start with step number one. So in step number one, I'm just giving you an overview of what is that we're going to be doing in this code lab. So in this code lab, we're going to be learning about stateful widgets and how to do the set state method to trigger changes. Then we're going to be moving up the ladder, and we're going to say, okay, now the next level of state management that you can do is using Value Notifier, Value Listenable. Then we're going to step it up a little. We're going to be sharing data between a couple of widgets. Then we're going to be triggering rebuilds from one widget to another widget. And then we're going to be learning the concepts of lifting the state. What does it mean to lift the state? We'll also we're going to be leveraging more than one service using multi-provider. Also communicating between services, and last but not least, one of my favorite ones, using consumer widgets and listening for changes and rebuilding using the change notifier provider and change notifier services. So here is a quick schematic of what we will be building today, as well as what we will end up if you follow along with me in Dartpad, where I'm going to be showing you that's exactly what we're going to be ending up as far as like the final piece of this project. So let's start. I'm going to be moving this to the side, and then now we're going to proceed to step number two, where I say what the requirements are for following along in this code lab. So the only two requirements is having a computer with a browser and a stable internet connection, because you don't need to install anything. That's all you need. So let's proceed to step number three. See, we're flying through this tutorial. So now we're in step number three. So the first thing you're going to do is set up your project. I am going to move this over to the side, and I am on step number 3. So for those of you who are following along. So I am going to delete everything in Dartpad because I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to start from scratch. So the things that I'm going to be doing is setting up my application. First thing, you need to import the Flutter package material because we're going to be using the material package. So I hope you guys can see the code. I am going to even zoom in a little more. There we go. So the first thing that I'm doing is importing the material package. The next thing that I'm going to be doing is creating the main method. So the main method, as you know, is the most important method in a Flutter application because it launches it. It's the one that bootstraps the application. Now, the second method that you need to know about is the run app method. The run app method is the first method in the framework that then gets called to mount the first widget in the widget tree. And then the first widget, because we remember everything in Flutter is a widget, I am going to be adding the root widget, which is the material app widget. So the material app widget is the first widget that you see. Like it's kind of like the root of the widget. This is the one that trickles down, the one that builds the widget structure and provides the material design aspects of your application. So I'm going to be adding, of course, the debug show checked mode banner, which I know is a mouthful. And then you set it to false because you don't want to see the sash on the corner. And then now we're gonna set up what the home, like the home widget will be. Remember, everything in Flutter is a widget, even like page level widgets. So everything in Flutter is a widget. So I'm gonna be calling it my app. And this is just again one simple application that is gonna have one simple widget. That widget is gonna be called my app. In Flutter, you have two types of widgets that you can build custom: stateful or stateless. Stateless widgets are just widgets that just get painted on the screen. They don't persist any states. And then stateful widgets are widgets that encapsulate some logic and they separate the logic into a separate state. And then that way the widget can just rebuild as many times as it wants while maintaining the state in a separate object, which is the state object. So I'm going to just be starting from scratch by just creating a simple stateless widget. Again, for those of you who are following along, I am in step number 3, and you can just copy paste this code and you can see me do it. Or if you are like me and you want to learn Flutter, you type it yourself. So I'm going to be doing the same thing. I'm going to be creating a class called my app that extends stateless widget. A stateless widget is not going to persist any state, but I'm just going to start from there so that you see where things come from and how I start doing things. So I'm going to continue typing it, and every widget that you want to build on your own, you have to override the build method. The build method is the most important method in a widget, so you need to override it. And then what you're actually telling the framework is, Flutter, please execute this build method for me because this is where my widget hierarchy is. So pretty much that's exactly what you do. You create a build method with a build context. The build context, you're going to see it a lot later because it's so important. The context is a pretty much a handle that tells you where the widget is in the widget tree, and then it allows you to traverse the widget tree up the hierarchy, finding things available to you from the application. This is how we later are going to be traversing the widget tree, and we're going to be walking up up to our parents to bring in like services and things that are provided to us. With the context, you can pull in like navigator, you can put the provider, you can pull information about theming, the media queries, and a lot of cool things that you can do. So let's continue. So now what I'm going to be returning out of this method is a scaffold widget, because I want to create like a good foundation for my page. And then again, a scaffold is nothing more than just another widget that just provides a good scaffolding for you to start your pages. Like it gives you like a header, it gives you a bottom bar, a drawer, a body. So you got like a floating button, a lot of cool things under the material design. So I am going to set up a body, and the body will be just the body of the application. And I'm going to be creating a center widget because I want to center it right in the middle of the screen, center just like any other positional widgets are also widgets. Like you could do align, center, positioned, stack, and then you can do all of those that allow you to do that. Container also provides like margin. So it's a great vast array of widgets that are at your disposal out of the box without you having to bring any other libraries. So let's continue. So I'm going to be creating a child to the center, and I'm going to be creating my own widget. So I'm just going to say my widget. So you see, this is how you work in Flutter. You build structures. First, we created the material app widget, which encapsulates the my app widget. Then the my app widget encapsulates another widget called my widget. So it's pretty much like that. And then my widget is nothing more than yet another widget where we will just be showing something in there. So I'm going to now create my other widget, which is called, I'm going to say, let me just give a little bit of space in here. So you see, I'm building this widget hierarchy, and then you will see how it works. So I'm going to create another class. I'm going to call it my widget. Also, I'm going to do it stateless, and make sure that for performance purposes, whenever you're trying to create a widget, first you create it as a stateless widget. Then when you see that this widget is going to be updating its own state, or you want to bring more animations or make it in a very interactive fashion, then you can convert it to a stateful widget, because usually stateful widgets are very memory demanding. So just make sure that you can start with a stateless widget, because it usually just gets painted on the screen. But if you want to then upgrade it, it's easy to do so. So I am going to create inside of this stateless widget, I am going to, just so that I can show you how you maintain state within a widget, I am going to create a simple property called int. And it's going to be called count with an initial value of 0, for example. As always, you override the build method, right? And then you provide the build context. And then all I am going to return out of this widget is a simple column. So I'm going to return a column, another very useful widget. And then I'm going to set like a main axis size of main axis.min. So I'm going to say main axis size.min. This is what I'm saying with this is I want my columns, the contents, the children of my column to occupy the minimum space. I don't want it to stretch. So that's all. So I'm going to then now set up my children, and the children would be just a simple text widget that just says hello world, and I'm going to just show the count up there. So I'm going to interpolate it here, and I'm just going to do that. Let's make it a little bigger so we can use a style on this text widget. I'm going to say style theme, and then you remember the context, you can pull in the theme. So that's why I use the context by saying theme.of context. What I'm doing with this, I'm saying all the themes that I get inherited as a widget in the widget hierarchy, let me just pull it out of the hierarchy. So I can go up the tree, find the nearest theme, and then I pull it down. I'm going to use the text theme, and then I'm going to be using the headline 4, actually, like in the tutorial. Like in the code that I'm just showing you. So let's just keep it there. Let's run it. Let's see what it looks like. So far, I have not done anything still with state management. I'm just going to show you how is it that we start. So at the beginning, you just get a stateless widget. There's no update, nothing that updates it, nothing that happens. So it just gets painted on the screen. That's all it does. Now, if you want to then say, I want to proceed and I want to add more interactivity to this widget, that is then that you need to convert it to a stateless widget. So let's go now to step number 4 if you're following along, and we're going to be talking about stateful widget. So now you're going to be converting it to a stateful widget because you want to maintain state within a single widget. This is a type of state called ephemeral. Ephemeral is because it only lives in one single widget, but another widget cannot access that one. So the basic approach in doing this is just a stateful widget where it only lives in a single widget but no other widgets. Very simple. And then the way that it does it, if you see the schematic right here, you see the stateful widget. The stateful widget is still immutable. It does not change. It's just that the state tells it to rebuild every time. There's no other way around it. Everything that changes in your state triggers the widget to rebuild because the widgets are not like mutable. Widgets are immutable. Like the widget is just the configuration that you feed to Flutter. It's like the whole widget. Remember the three widget trees? You have the widget tree, the element tree, and then the render tree. So then in this particular case, the state is the one that holds the information for your widget, while the widget just rebuilds every time there's a change. Every time there's a change, you rebuild. You added one more letter, rebuild. It's not like you have to grab the same instance and change the like a property in it. No, the whole widget gets rebuilt every single time. So, and the way to trigger that is by calling the set state available in the state object. The state persists the information across multiple widget rebuilds. So now let me show you how to do that. So I'm going to move this over to the side. And now instead of making this a stateless widget, let's make it a stateful widget. How do you make this widget, this stateless widget, into a stateful widget? Well, it's a two-part approach. So the first thing that you do is convert this class to stateful widget. You say convert it to a stateful widget, and then you come right here and you close it. Then you create another class, which is going to be the one that maintains the state and triggers the build method. So the kind of like the convention is to actually use the same name of the stateful widget and rename the state widget state. So you call it my widget is the stateful widget, and then my widget state is the state. So you do this and you say my widget state, and you say extends state of this type of stateful widget. What is this saying to you? This is saying this is the state that I'm going to be maintaining for this widget. And then last but not least, you override the method that instantiates the state for that widget. So it has to be the same name of the state, and then you have a method called create state, and then you instantiate that. So it's a two-step approach. So first you convert it to stateful widget, you create the state class, which is pretty much the same stuff. See, the same stuff that I had. I just had to name it whatever state, and then it extends the state. And then the main widget creates the state by just overriding the method called create state. So that is what I love about that. And if I show you again the schematic, this is pretty much what it happens. The stateful widget gets mounted on the widget tree. And then if you want to persist the state, it kind of creates a separate object and keeps it here in memory and say, I don't want you to destroy the values that are here because I'm going to be rebuilding multiple times. So keep my state outside of me, but still is only available for this widget. So this is called ephemeral state. And if you see right here, the state widget is the one that actually triggers the rebuild by calling set state, which we're going to be showing you in just a minute. So now let's continue. So after I create my stateful widget, I can just run this and you will see that there's no change whatsoever. But now if I want to introduce some changes in there, I'm going to have to then execute the set state in the state to actually trigger a change. So the next thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be changing this from final to just a plain integer. Why? Because final variables do not change. Final variables are only they get assigned once at the beginning, either an assignment or via a constructor, but then that's it. They don't change values after that. They just stay like in that with that value. So I'm going to now introduce another component. I am going to be adding a button. So I'm going to be saying text button, and then the text button I'm going to have an on press event. And then here's where I'm going to be doing my changes, but don't worry about it. I am going to be adding a child, and it's going to be a constant text value, a text widget that just says, click me to update. So how do I make this widget more interactive so that I can see that number right there change over time as I click the button? Now I want to make it so that that number changes. So the way that you do it is using this provision available to the state class called setState. SetState is a method provided by the framework that actually tells Flutter, something changed in the state, go ahead and rebuild the widget because it needs to update itself with the new values. So this is exactly what you do here. So here inside of the setState, I'm going to say, I'm going to grab my count value and I'm going to increment it. let's say every time I change, and then that's it. So this I'm telling Flutter, I am going to update this property, but you go ahead and rebuild the stateful widget because he needs to see the new changes. That's all it's doing. So now I'm going to run it again. Now you will see how there's a new button showing, and every time I click me to update, you see the value now incrementing. But every time I'm clicking on that button, the whole widget is rebuilding. You see, there's no like I am going to the text label and changing the label of the text. No, it's the whole widget that gets rebuilt. That is how Flutter works. So every time you submit, you click on update, we are submitting a new widget to the framework so that it gets repainted on the screen. So that is how you maintain a state within a single widget. This is called ephemeral state. But now let's say you want to, for example, like you want now to let's say copy this widget and you want to do like another type of widget. So the thing that you do here, for example, let's say if you wanna reuse like this same widget and you just want to have like another widget, you can definitely do so. So let me show you this. So if I want to now, for example, I am right now on step number 4. This is what I just showed you, like very simple. You can just copy the whole code and then you see now how state management works. But now let's proceed with, for example, triggering a widget rebuild from another type of a widget. So very simple. So again, remember, like I mentioned, widgets are kind of like a hierarchy, and they get built like a tree. One widget contains another widget, but this widget contains multiple widgets, and so on and so forth. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to be creating another widget, just another widget. Look, so you see, what I'm going to be creating now is I'm going to make another widget be the one that actually triggers those changes. So how do you do that? Very simple. So the way that you do it is I'm going to be creating yet another widget. You see this button right here? So we're going to make this into a separate widget. How about that? So I'm going to be creating a class called my child widget. So I'm going to say in class, my child widget. So you create just another widget. But this time I'm going to make it stateless. Look, extends stateless widget. So this is again how you continue building widgets. So I am going to now, into this particular widget, I want to give it a callback, like a function. So I'm going to be creating a function that I'm going to be using as a callback, that through that callback, I am going to trigger the changes up the hierarchy. So I'm going to be calling it on widget clicked. I am in step number 4, step number 5 actually, for those of you following along. So I'm going to be creating the constructor of this my child widget, and I'm going to be passing this on widget click. Sorry. And as always, you need to override the build method because this is yet another widget. You can just say build context like this, build context. And inside of this widget, I am going to return this widget right here. So I am going to copy all of that, and I am going to return it out of this widget. But instead of me calling the set state in this widget, I am going to call this on widget clicked, which is kind of like my callback. But this, as I'm going to be showing you in just a minute, this is a widget that I'm going to be adding inside another widget, and I am going to trigger the change in the parent. So you can pass another widget information like that, like down the hierarchy, and then you can trigger changes up the chain. So that's exactly what's going to be happening here. Now that I have this widget called my child widget, which is just going to be fed a function from inside of that widget, we're going to trigger that function. So let me show you. I'm going to get rid of this button. And all I'm going to do is call my new widget. So I'm going to grab my widget. I'm going to put it here. And this widget takes as a parameter, as you saw, a callback. So I'm going to be passing on widget clicked. And it's just a simple callback that now that callback will perform the set state and will increment the count property here. So now you see how inside of this widget, which is this one down here, I am going to trigger the changes from a separate widget. So I'm going to hit run. And then you will see, you will barely see any changes. So there are no changes that you will see apparently in here, but at least I've shown you how I was able to create yet another widget that then triggers the changes in the parent. The my widget state is the one that holds the state, but then there's another widget that you give it a method, and from inside, I trigger the changes. So you see that is a second way on how you can trigger changes from one widget to another, kind of like in a hierarchy fashion. So very simple to use, very straightforward. That's awesome. Now let's see how you can now how are we going to confirm that now this widget is only persisting the state only within itself, that no other widgets can share it. How do you do that? Let's confirm that. So the way that you do it, let's go back up to the my app widget right here, my app. And instead of having a center widget with just this, we're actually going to be adding a column widget. So I am still on step number 5. So I'm going to create a column widget. And I'm just going to be adding 2 children. Very simple. And then to each children of the column will be a separate copy of this my widget. So I want to keep it spread apart and them to occupy the same real estate in the column. So I'm going to be using an expanded widget for that. And then I'm going to make my center widget the child of that expanded. I copy this expanded widget twice, just like that. And check this out. I created 2 copies of the my widget. Each one of these is supposed to maintain its own state. So I'm going to hit run. And then you will see 2 copies of the same widget. 2 copies right there. Look, so you have 2 copies. But check this out. If I click on this, only this one gets updated. Oh, not this one. But if I click this one, it's a completely separate copy. That way, in memory, you can think of it that like this. It's looking pretty much like this. So it's going to have 2 copies of the same widget like this. So it's 2 copies of the same widget. One copy maintains its own state. Another copy maintains its own state. And then that's how they maintain each other. So it's like completely separate. That's why I call it ephemeral, because this is only a state that is only maintained within a single widget, but this other widget doesn't know anything about it. They both maintain their own widgets separate, like their own, they all maintain their own state. If I now do this and make a third copy, I just do this, and now I have yet a third widget. Now you will see another widget, the 3 of them maintaining their own state. This one has its own state. This one has its own state in memory. This one has its own state. You see, that's how you maintain state in separate widgets. And then you make them very interactive, but only on their own. Now, how do you make it so that the widgets now know about the same state? How do you do that? Now, this is a concept of lifting the state. So you need to lift the state so that then widgets know about it. How do you do that? Now let's go and learn about something called the Value Notifier and Value Listenable builder. So now we're doing the lifting the state. So we're lifting it up. So the Value Notifier is a class that holds a single value, and then it broadcasts the changes to whoever is listening. So you have a Value Notifier, and then the Value Notifier changes its value, but somebody needs to listen to the changes happening in the Value Notifier. For that, you use something called the Value Listenable builder. Value Notifier is a value listenable that broadcasts the changes. And the Value Listenable builder is a widget that listens to a Value Notifier or Value Listenable. So this is what we're going to be doing. So we're going to take out the state now from inside of the widget. It's not going to be stateful anymore. We're going to take the state out of the widget, and we're going to lift it one level higher. That way, multiple widgets can read the same value, as you can see in the schematics in here. So we're going to be lifting the state, and then we're going to broadcast the changes down the hierarchy so that the lower widgets, the widgets below, can have access to it and be notified that they need to rebuild because there is a new change. So let's implement that. Now I'm on step number 6. So let's go there. Now I'm gonna just reduce this to just 2 widgets again. And then now we're going to be refactoring this my widget class. So it is a stateful widget, but we're going to bring it back down to be a stateless widget. Very simple. So how do you bring it back to stateless widgets? A stateless widget. Just get rid of this and make it stateless. You're done. Pretty much. Not yet. But at least, that's just the beginning. So now the first thing that you do is now we're not going to keep this internal state anymore inside of a state. Now we're going to lift it up. So instead of keeping it here, we want to create an instance of value notifier that will be provided to us. Again, like I said, a value notifier is a value listenable type of class that holds a single value and then broadcasts the changes down the hierarchy. So you create a final value notifier type of integer because we're going to call it exactly the same. We're going to be calling it count. And then I'm going to be creating a constructor to provide this value. So it's going to be called my widget. And then you say this that count because I am going to be feeding that value in it. So for those of you following along, I am in step number 6 of the Colab. And then now we're going to be creating a value listenable. A value listenable is now what is going to be changing. It's going to be listening to changes in that value and rebuild itself. Why did I make it stateless? Why? Because the whole widget, it won't be rebuilt. Only the section that needs to change. Which section? The text widget. So that is why I made it stateless, because not the whole widget needs to be rebuilt. That is one of the performance optimizations that you need to be aware of. Don't always make the whole widget rebuild, because if you build the whole widget just for one little change, then it doesn't make sense. And then your application becomes very, very sluggish and all that. So just make sure, always evaluate the things that need to change and just focus on that single area. In this particular case, this is the only thing that needs to change. So I'm going to wrap it inside a value listenable builder widget of type integer, because I'm only going to be listening to a single value. So out of this, a value listenable builder needs to take a value listenable. So the value listenable will be our count up here. So this is the value notifier is type value listenable. So you need to feed it to that value listenable builder. And the builder method is nothing more than a callback that takes a context, the value that changed, and a child widget for optimization purposes. And you just return your widget, just simple as that. And then the next change that you need to do, we are not going to be using ephemeral state anymore. Now we're going to be using app state. We're moving the app, we're moving the state, we're lifting it up. So in here, all you need to do is trigger the change in the value notifier, and then whoever is listening, that is the one that actually rebuilds itself. Who? This guy up here. So now inside of the on widget clicked event, all I'm going to say is just count dot value, because the value listenable has a value in it, and then you just say plus plus. That's it. So now that I've refactored my widget to now take a value notifier as opposed to being a stateful widget, now we need to lift the state above this widget. So how do you do it? You bring it up. So who's the one that's going to be providing that? The my app widget. So the my app widget, you create also a value notifier type integer, and we're going to call it count as well. That's okay. And I'm going to initialize it with a value. I'm going to say value notifier. I'm going to initialize it with 0 so that we're still consistent. And then remember that this widget, we just refactored it so that it takes a count type of value notifier. So let's feed it into each one. So I'm going to be feeding the count value notifier down the hierarchy. So now I'm feeding the same value notifier to both of my child widgets so that they listen to changes that happen to that value notifier from anywhere in the application. For example, this widget will trigger a change, but this guy will listen. Then this guy triggers a change, this guy will listen, and both of them will be in sync. So let's run it up to here. So I'm going to run it. And then you will see now that we will have 2 widgets. Okay, actually, I need to make the change instead of being like this type of like the type of the way that you're expressing it. You have to write it like this. So you have to say count dot value, or you can just say, actually, I'm going to just read the value, not the count anymore. So I have to read the value. Sorry about that. So that's all I needed in there. Let me just try it again. And then now I'm going to show you how that works. So now remember before that when I clicked in here, only this widget changed. Pay attention to both widgets. So I'm going to be clicking here where it says click me to update. And now you see the changes being reflected in both places. That is what I'm saying now. We lifted the state so that two widgets are listening to the same changes and they stay in sync. Before we did the ephemeral state with the stateful widgets, now we made it a stateless widget and then we fed a value notifier down the hierarchy. Now each widget are in sync. I can trigger the changes from up here or I can trigger the changes from down here and both of them stay in sync. So this is the first premise of how you lift the state out of widgets so that they stay in sync. So I hope that you guys learned that piece. And thank you guys. Hello to everyone who just joined. Thank you so much. So let's continue. So and I right now I am in step number 6. Now we're gonna be lifting the state a level higher. So remember, we had it in the stateful widget. Now we lifted it one level higher to the my app using a value notifier with just a single value. Now we're going to be bringing it much higher using the provider, which is one of my favorite simple state management packages. And again, provider, like you've heard out there, provider is a simple state management approach that allows you to decouple the business logic from the UI rendering logic. That's all it's doing. The same thing that we're doing right now, we're keeping the logic inside of the widgets, like inside of the build methods and inside of the widgets, but that is not a good practice. The best practice is to actually take all of that logic outside into a separate class. That is the promise of the provider, and that is exactly what you're going to be doing right now. So in this case, I am actually taking all that information, the count information, outside of the widgets and making it kind of like a business logic outside of the widget. And then what it does, what the provider does, is it provides that information and trickles it down the widget tree so that other widgets can just pull the information and grab the information that they need and respond to changes accordingly. So let me show you how you do the provider, immediately how you do the provider. Very simple. The first thing that you need to do is just create a class. You can create a class of anything. You can just call it anything. So the first thing that you're going to be creating is a class. So I'm going to be saying I'm going to be creating a class. I'm just going to say class value service. That's it. That's what you need for starting a provider. And then inside of your class, you're going to be holding the values that your widgets need as part of their information to rebuild themselves. In this case, my class is just going to have one property called count type integer. Simple as that. You just take the information that your widget needs, take it outside, and put it in a separate class. That is all you need. Now the next thing that you're going to need is just actually creating, like, what I actually, let me just show you right here. We're step number 7 right now. So here it is. We're in step number 7, and the first thing that I did was actually we're gonna get to that. We're gonna show you how is it that you do it, but you're gonna need the provider package. Remember, in Dartpad you don't need to install anything. That's what's cool about it. All you need to do is just import your packages, and then you should be good. So the first thing that you do is you create a class, and then you take out those values that are inside of your widget that represent your business logic, and you take it outside. That is the first thing that you do, right? Now the next thing is that you're going to be refactoring the application so that the provider or this class value service is actually, let me just move it actually a little higher so that you can see it. I'm going to move it up here. So the thing, you want this class to be available to all the widgets in your hierarchy. So you need to inject it from a higher level so that it gets trickled down. You can inject it in sections of your application, and then that way you only contain it within a region of your application. But it's good to keep it, to a higher level where your child widgets need it. So you have to hide it. You have to have it at a top level. So the thing that you do, how do you wrap this application, and how do you provide the provider classes down the hierarchy? Well, you use a provider widget. So I'm going to be using provider. And then to the provider, you instantiate the service that is going to be provided to your widget. So you say create, and then you instantiate it in just a simple method, just like this. And then you say value service. Just like this, I am actually going to be providing it to the whole hierarchy. Which hierarchy? the whole material application. So you see, I could have chosen like a lower level type of hierarchy, maybe like a page or like a section, a module of my application. But I decided to keep it at the highest level so that all my widgets can access it underneath it. So that is how you do it. You create a provider widget, you create an instance of value service. The way that this does, it does it in a very lazy fashion. So it does lazy initialization. So it instantiates it at the beginning of when the application launches, and then it makes it available to all the widgets underneath it. So because I made it all the way at the top, so now every widget under the material app widget will be able to access this value service. Now let's update this application right here, like the value service. We're not going to be using the value notifier anymore. So you can get rid of it. You can completely get rid of it because we're going to be updating this. So we're not going to need this at all, but I'm going to be providing a label. I'm going to say label because I want to identify my widget. So I'm going to be creating a constant, again, my widget, a constructor that updates this label. This is what I'm going to be using to just identify my widget pretty much. But now I am going to get rid of this value listenable kind of thing because I'm not going to be using a value listenable anymore. But what I'm going to be using is I am going to be pulling the service that got injected up here. Look, this class that got injected above, I am going to pull it down the hierarchy. How do you do it? Very simple. That's why I told you need the context. So I'm going to be here saying value service. And I'm going to be saying a value service. I'm going to be creating my instance. So how do I pull it from up there? Because it got injected in at the top. So now how do I pull it down to my widget? So I'm going to say provider.of, and then you provide the type that you're pulling. Because remember, you need to go up the hierarchy, and whoever up the hierarchy is providing that service, you need to pull the right type of service because there are many widgets providing more than one type of service. So here I want to specify that is value service, and then you say context. With this is now how I can go up the hierarchy and inspect every parent. Oh, are you providing the service? No. Okay, let me go up. Are you providing the value service? No. Okay, let me keep going up. Are you providing the value service? Yes. Okay, give it to me. And then you get it. Here, by saying listen equals false, you provide this. This is an optional parameter, but I always like to do it because when you do this, this means when any changes happen in your inside of the service, I don't want the whole widget to rebuild. By if you don't keep this in there and your provider inside your provided service triggers a change, the whole widget rebuilds. You don't want that. You want only the section in your widget that is only interested about the value to rebuild. So now that I have an instance of my service, let's read the service. So I don't need this anymore. I am going to, I'm not going to need that anymore. I don't need this value listenable anymore either. So I am going to just grab my text again. And instead, I am going to consume the value that is available in this value service. Very simple. I'm just going to say value service dot count. Very simple. You see, I'm now already, the logic that used to be embedded in the widget now is outside. The count is maintained somewhere else. Now let's increment that count. So the way that you increment the count, you just access the value. You say value service dot count, and you can just increment it like that. Very simple. Just like that. Now let's run the application. Let's see what it does. So if I just hit run, for example, actually I need to I need to refactor this. I'm just gonna remove this because we don't need it anymore. That's what's cool about it. But I'm gonna be passing a label because that's what we wanted to do. So the label here will be top widget, for example, and then this one is label bottom widget. And I am going to just say, instead of hello world, I am going to just consume that label right here, just like that. And I'm going to save it. So I am going to just hit run. And then you will see the widgets. And then if I click, you're like, oh, it's broken. Something happened. You're like, what? My update is not showing. But I am updating. Look, I am saying count plus plus. Well, The problem is that your widget is not rebuilding and you're not seeing the changes because nobody is listening to that. It has been triggered, but nobody is listening. You're thinking that is broken, but no. Let me add another page just so that you can see how that works. So I'm in step number 7, and I am going to just create another page. I'm just going to copy paste the code that is in there because it's a very simple page. So this page is a separate page, a separate widget. I am also accessing the service in the same way, and I am going to show the value that is in the provider. So how do I trigger that page? So let me show you how we will trigger it. So inside of this my widget, right here, I am going to be creating another. Widget up here in the my app widget. So I'm going to be creating. I'm going to be adding a button down here. This button will be able to trigger that page and just going to show it to me. So I'm going to just make these guys constant so that the application stops barking. So in the my app right here in the my app page, I'm going to be creating one button which I'm just going to be navigating to that new page. That new page then in turn is going to be accessing that service. So let's rebuild and let me show you how that works. So we're going to do exactly the same exercise. So you're going to see, I'm going to click 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. But you see that nothing changed? Actually, it did change. It's just that you're not seeing the change, but it's happening in memory. Now I'm going to go to another page where I am going to access that service. And if you go to that other page right here, look at the number 4. So it did get updated somehow. So the provider gets updated in memory while the widget rebuilds multiple times. But in this case, the thing that we did not do is listen to the real-time changes. So listening to real-time changes is different to storing the service in memory so that maybe other widgets down the hierarchy can access it. So let me do it again. I'm going to go back. And then look, it's still you don't read the values because this widget is now rebuilding and it's not listening to the changes in real time. It's just updating it. Look, it's updating the values. And if I click this one, also it's updating. Now when I go to the next page, this page actually rebuilds and pulls the values. But now I'm going to show you how you can make it so that your widgets respond to real-time changes of the state being updated in memory. So let me show you how you do that because it's very important. So we're going to go now to step number 8, which is now we're going to be using one of my favorite parts of using state management using the provider is using the change notifier. So change notifier is that type of, you have to extend it. So you can make any class change notifier. Change notifier is very similar to the value notifier, but value notifier only deals with a single value. Change notifier, you apply it at a class level. That way you can have multiple things inside of the class trigger changes for your widgets to consume. So now instead of just one single value, well, in this case, we're still doing count, but it applies to the whole class as opposed to just one property. Then now whenever we trigger changes in the change notifier, you need to notify your widgets of the change. Sorry about that. So let me show you now how you do it. So how do you turn this provided widget into a notifying widget? So the first thing that you do is you change this provider into change notifier provider. By just doing that, I am saying the service that is being injected at the root of this application will trigger the changes. Will say this changed. Go ahead and rebuild yourself instead of just me clicking and nothing happens. But then other widgets down the hierarchy are actually benefiting from it. No, you're gonna make it change notifier. Now you go to your service and you make it extend change notifier. Change notifier is that special class that has one very special API that allows to broadcast changes. And it has one specific method called notify listeners. Notify listeners now needs to be listened by any widget that is interested in the changes in this class so that it can rebuild itself and show the new values in the service. So how do you do that After you do change notifier, what do? Well, we're going to change this into a private property, and we're going to be creating like a getter and a setter. So I'm going to be creating a int get count, which just returns the count, of course. And I'm going to be creating a setter called also count. And then when you pass the value, when you're setting the change and you're doing this, look, count equals value. Sorry, count equals value. When you're setting the value, you're notifying every widget down the hierarchy that is listening to this change to rebuild itself. This is the premise of the change notifier. So it's just, you see, it's a very straightforward class. It only extends change notifier. And then when you set the value, whenever a value changes, then you trigger the notification. So I'm in step number 8 for those of you who are following along. Now, the only thing that I need to do is go back down to my widget. And now I want to listen to changes. Now I want to listen to the changes. Remember what we were doing here? Look, we're still doing it. If I just click here, nothing happens. Look, nothing happens. I want to listen to the changes that just happened that now increment this value to 35. I want to hear those changes. How do you do it? You use a specific widget called consumer. So I'm going to be wrapping this whole widget into my consumer widget. So just like the value notifier and the value listenable builder, you have the change notifier and the consumer widget. So I'm going to be grabbing now this column, and I am going to wrap it into a change notifier widget. So let me just grab this whole code right here, and I am going to create a consumer widget. A consumer widget now listens to a specific type of service, the service that extends change notifier, right? And then this consumer, what it does is any changes that occur within that service, whoever says notify listeners, then there is a method called builder inside of the consumer widget that gets executed. You need the context, you need the type of the service that is injected, actually the instance of the service that triggered the change, and a child for optimization purposes. Then you return the whole hierarchy. So let me just show you like this. Look, now you don't need this. Now you don't need to pull it out of the parent. This is already taken care of. It's taken care of for you. Now I'm still gonna be pulling that from the parent, from up the hierarchy, but inside of this consumer widget. The consumer widget is listening to all the changes that happen in the value service. Like every time I set the count, every time I set it, it will be notified. And then that way is what will make this whole widget rebuild. Is going to execute this every time this thing changes right here. See, I didn't have to make any changes to this one. Now check this out. By just me clicking run. And now I am going to be changing, for example, like the values in here. So now let me show you. Now if I click here, you will see the changes now change everywhere. Now this is way above, and now you see both changes happening. There's no state maintained at all in this widget. It's completely clean. There's no business logic. My business logic was to have a count somewhere so that all the other widgets in my application listen to it. And check this out. If I go to this page, I also can pull the values as well. So you see now that information is trickled down all throughout my application, and all the widgets are able to access the same information, keeping everybody in sync. So that is one of the things that I love about Change Notifier. Awesome. Let's continue to step number 9. Step number 9, now you want to provide more than one service. What if now, instead of just changing let's say the value of one thing, I want to have now another service. For example, in a real application, you have your separation of concerns. For example, you can have one service to handle the login. Then you have one service to pull information from your users. Then you have another service that handles, let's say, processing some other information in your business. As opposed to having all that information in a single service, you split it into multiple services, and that way you do proper decoupling of your business logic. All your business logic should not be sitting on one single service. you can split it into multiple services, and that way you organize it. One service for pulling information about your users, one for handling login information, one for handling processing images or whatever. Multiple services. So now I'm going to be showing you how you add more than one service so that you can also have it accessible throughout your application. So in this case, we're going to be using something called multi-provider. So multi-provider doesn't just provide one, but just like the name implies, provides more than one service and makes it available throughout the hierarchy. So we're going to be creating one more class, just like we did before. See, creating just a service is nothing more than creating a class that holds your business logic inside. No different. Now this one, I'm going to be persisting a color. Remember, one holds a value, but the other one holds a color. So I'm just going to be calling this class color service. I am also going to be extending change notifier because I want to broadcast the changes. And it's going to have an initial color of red, for example. And then every time I set the color, it's going to be triggering the change that the color changed. So all I need to do up here is refactor. Instead of just providing one single provider, I am going to be providing more than one because I have the value service up here and I have my color service down here. I want to make it available to everybody. So the way that you do it is you create a multi-provider. And then the multi-provider has a property called providers. And then providers is an array of providers. So the way that you do it is you just do this. You see, you keep this exactly the same structure as before, but now you're going to be doing change notifier provider. So you see, you have more than one provider. And then you can provide more than one service. So now I'm going to say provide another, just give me another provider right there. And then let's use now the color service. So I'm providing the value service. Now I'm providing the color service. This is the multi-provider right here. I am adding that. As you can see it, this is the material app. This is my multi-provider. I am adding the providers, as an array. And then I'm sorry, I misspelled it. It's multi-provider. There you go. So now this is how now you provide more than one service down the hierarchy. Now you can use this anywhere. Now let's do another refactor to our my widget. I am in step number 9 for those who are following along. So let's make a refactor here. And instead of now, let's say what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be creating, let me just create another, wrap my a widget into another service. So I'm going to be creating one other widget called notification service. So it's going to be like a very small widget. So let me just show you real quick how I'm going to add it. So I am in step number 9. And then I'm going to be creating that specific widget called like notification widget. So if you see it right here, down here, I created that widget called notification service. And that notification service is just a small widget that just shows a notification on the top. So I'm going to be grabbing that widget. And let me show you where I'm going to be adding that widget. So it's just a widget that shows like a notification. It's very simple. So I'm going to be adding this widget down here in my file. It's just a simple widget that shows me a notification. So let me show you where I'm going to add it. So right here in the my app, I am going to be adding an app bar. And then inside of the app bar, I'm going to be adding something called actions. And then I'm going to be adding this new notification widget. Let me show you what it looks like. So when I run this application, now you will see like one widget up here in my app bar, and it's going to show like a number, right? But then the thing about this notification widget is that it has a value. And if I click here, for example, like on this widget, I want this widget to show changes up there in that other widget. So if I click here, for example, you're going to see it in just a minute. If I click on this button, you see the values changing up here as well. It's very cool, right? It's because that notification widget is also using the consumer. So it's also using a consumer widget. I'm sorry, the notification widget is also using a consumer so that it can look at the value of the count and then it can update itself. Look, so I can click on either one of these guys. Look, I can click on the one below or I can click on the one above, And you see that widget up there also updating each other. So it's pretty cool. So you see, I just added that widget. I can add another widget. Now let's make it so that I can read the color. So remember, I'm only updating the value. I'm only reading the value up there. But now let's make it so that we update the color up there. So as you see, I am providing the color service. Now the only thing that I need to do in my notifications, in my notification widget, is just wrap my widget into another consumer widget. Look, so this is the notification widget right here, which is only listening for the consumer of the value. But now I want to change the color. So how do I do it? I will replace this whole container by another consumer. So you see, you have a consumer out here that is listening for the changes in the color. And now this consumer right here will only listen for the changes in the value. Now you want to find a way to change that color up there. Let me show you how to do that. So how do you do it? Let me add one more button to the my widget right here. I'm gonna add one more button, which is good. I'm gonna be adding like another one of these guys, like another my child widget. Very simple. Check this out. So I'm gonna be adding another button, and if you see right there, it's very simple. I don't even need this. Like I can just do this real quick like that. And then look what I'm doing. I am going to be just setting a color to this widget. I can say, for example, colors dot blue, for example. Look what I'm doing. Inside of the widget, when I click on my widget, I am going to pull the provider from the hierarchy and update the color. That is all this is going to be doing. So if I reload my widget, now you will see these two widgets with a new button that is ready to be to me for me to update the color up there. So while this button updates the number, you see the number up there. Now I'm going to update the color. If I click it, you see it was blue. It's just that you couldn't see it. Let me change it to purple because it's very hard to see. So it actually got updated to blue. So you see, you use multiple providers. Now this one, and they are all change notifier providers. While this updates the number, this updates the color. If I click here, you see it updated the color. I love the fact that I could do like stuff like that. Let me show you now how you do, for example, how you do it so that you can do multiple colors and multiple cool things. At the end of every step, I am showing you the full code so that you can test it on your own as well. You can just grab the whole thing. I am going to just show you exactly how this works. So I'm going to just grab all the code and test it again one more time for you. That's why I created it like this so that you can actually also follow along. Now, if I run it, you will see both widgets updating not just the color. Look, I'm going to update the number again. I am updating the number everywhere. I can click on this one as well. I can update the number here, but this one will update it to one color. Look, this one will update it to green, while this one will update it to, let me see when it works, will update it to purple. This one, if I click it again, it should update it again to green. This one will update it again to purple. So you see, very cool. This is how you maintain state at a higher level and you trigger changes down the widget tree. And now for the last type of way that you can experiment state management in your application is actually a very common case. What if you want to access a service from another service? How do you do that? Let's say inside of my login service, I want to access information about a user. So instead of using the widget to pull all the services within a widget, no, your widget can just import or can pull a single service, but then one single service can consolidate other business logic. That way you keep your widget rendering logic pristine and you keep it separate. Your widgets are not supposed to know anything about the business logic. The business logic should be separate and isolated to a service. So you can even have one common service that actually pulls both information, consolidate it, and have it available then for a widget as a single service. So let me show you how you do that. So in this case, I am also doing the multi-provider, but I am going to create a separate service. And inside of that service, I am pulling other services. But then the widgets can only, you can pull all the services if you want, but you can only pull one service if you want also, which is much simpler. So let me show you how to do that. Very simple. So I'm going to be creating yet another class. Remember, your business logic, always keep it in separate classes. Separate classes where you keep all the logic in there. So I'm going to be creating a separate class called combined service. So in this combined service, and see, notice this, that I'm not gonna be calling a change notifier, because you don't have to all the time. If this widget is not the one that is actually triggering, if this class is not the one broadcasting the changes, but only consolidating the information, you don't have to make it. It's just a regular class. So now in this class, I'm gonna be creating a method called set both color and value. So what do I need in this method? I'm gonna be needing the context. I'm gonna be needing a color and a value, for example. And then why am I importing the context in here? Why? Because remember, with the provided service, you can access other services. So you need to make sure that, for example, if your services are provided in some way, you can actually pull other services, that are available throughout the application. So in this case, I can say this, look, color service, right? Then I can bring another service. Look, provider.off, I'll say color service, context. See, I'm pulling another service inside another service. Listen equals false. And then I'm going to pull the value service. And then I'm going to say provider.off value service, also passing the context, and listen equals false. So you see, I am using one service as a proxy, as kind of like as a middleman between my widget and these services. Instead of pulling multiple services into a single widget, I can just pull one service that consolidates all their logic. And all I need to do here is say color service dot color equals C, like the color, and value service that count equals V. So you see, by just me calling this method somewhere and importing this service, I am actually talking to two other services, which is amazing. And just by doing this, it will broadcast the changes that were set here, the changes in the color. And when I set the count, I will also broadcast the changes to whoever else is listening in this application. So that's awesome. So now how do you pull this service? You also can pull it from anywhere in your application. Let me show you how you do that. It's so simple. So now you come up here and you can also provide that service up here. That's the first thing you need to do. You need to provide it. So instead of making a change notifier provider, just provide it as a regular service. And then you call it combined service. You see these services are going to be available to this guy in there. Now what I'm going to be doing is just creating another button in my application. Look how simple. I am going to be adding just one more button down here that I'm going to be accessing my combined service. I access the combined service, and all I need to do is just call a single method that will then send information to two other services, and whoever is listening to those services will wake up, rebuild itself, and update the information. So look at what this method is sending. It's sending the context, because this context does have the services available to it. I pass one value called orange and a value of 100. So look at what I'm going to do now. So when I run this now, you're going to see the changes now triggered from one spot, and other spot in the application is going to read and respond to those changes. So let's keep doing the same thing. So I'm going to be clicking, for example, here, like click to update. I am going to just update the values one more time. Look, so by clicking here, I update the values everywhere. If I click on this one, I update the values everywhere. If I click here, I will only update the color up here to one single type of color. I'm gonna update it to green. If I click on this one, I will update it to purple. But if I click on this guy, on this button down here, I will change the value to 100 and the color to orange by just clicking here, and there we go. And everywhere else also it got updated. So you see, in a very simple and very straightforward way, I showed you all the simple strategies in which you can manage your state, lift up the state, use more than one service, have services communicate with one another, and make your widgets completely decoupled from the business logic. All they need to do is have access to the service and just execute the logic that is inside of those services. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you so much. This was the whole code lab, and I hope that you guys also take a look at some of the other code labs that I have available in my portfolio, some other workshops that I have, and I hope that in this session, very quick that we just had, you learned about stateful widgets, you learned about the value notifier, how to lift the state, how share data between two widgets, how maintain just data within a single widget, how one widget can trigger another widget to rebuild, how to keep data in sync among all the widgets using change notifiers, using multi-provider widgets, and even having services communicate with one another. So again, I totally appreciate everybody who joined and who followed along. The whole code is also available there, but I would appreciate if you also again follow me on my personal portfolio, follow me on Twitter. I will have other events of this kind in the future, and if you want to join and learn more about Flutter, more than happy to be there for you guys. So again, let me just I'll just wrap up on my slides in here just so that you guys can see. So again, thank you so much, and again, thank you to your GDSE for having invited me. And now I'm gonna open it up for questions. If anybody has questions about state management or Flutter in general, so I'm gonna stop sharing right now.
Yes, sir. I can see a few questions in the chat. I'm just presenting to the screen.
Great. Yeah, so the question, Anurag, so again, thank you again for your questions. So you say how to do more UI styling to make our app more beautiful. Yes, of course. Flutter allows you to do that to make your applications very beautiful, so that you can, because the great thing about Flutter is that you can paint every pixel on the screen. You have the freedom of updating, creating your application as beautiful as you can using core widgets, and sometimes you don't even have to bring like other libraries to make your applications more beautiful. And here in my portfolio, I have a couple of code labs that Anurag, that I suggest you follow along. You can take a look at some of these code labs that I've put together so that you can build beautiful UIs in Flutter with very minimal effort, without having to bring separate libraries. And I show you here how you build really cool and engaging applications, so that you can learn how to make them real cool as well. All you have to do is just learn about layouts. I'm showing you here, for example, like a couple of applications, a couple of some of the workshops that I've built to build like really cool apps. So if you just follow along on these, you will be able to learn how to build some of those type of apps. Very cool looking, very nice, sleek, minimalist UIs. But it's all about you. If you look at my portfolio right there and the collabs that I've provided, it's all about just learning layouts and learning like the intricacies on how to assemble it together, pretty much. But yes, follow along on my collabs. I think I'm gonna drop the link again one more time for the collab. So I'm gonna be just dropping it one more time. Um, Andrea, can you drop the link one more time? Um,
Yes, sir. Sure.
Thank you. If you could just drop the link one more time so Anurag can grab it. He may not have grabbed it at the beginning. Thank you so much. So yes. Can we answer other questions on the? Yes, so yes. What about the management of the backend database? So that is a separate thing. So you don't do backend in Flutter. Remember, Flutter is just for the UI layer. Where if you want to do management of backend, then you have to implement other strategies for that. If you're talking about how to implement how to do state management on pulling information from the backend, you can follow exactly the same approach that I did. You create a class that encapsulates, let's say, all your HTTP calls, or maybe you encapsulate all the information about Firebase if you're using something like Cloud Firestore. My recommendation is to also keep it in a separate class, encapsulate all that functionality, and just expose the methods that provide the entry points to, let's say, add one value, remove one value, delete one value, get a list of values. You create a very comprehensive API, but you have to encapsulate all that logic in a separate service. You can provide it the same way that I showed you using the multi-provider, but make sure that you don't do all that logic in the UI. You don't do that logic inside of the build method. Inside of the build method, you should only have imported your provided services and the methods that pull the data, but no business logic at all. I hope that answers your question. The next, provider versus value notifier. So that's what I showed you. So the provider is nothing more than a widget that provides a class, so in more than one value. So that is the provider. And the value notifier is not a provider. The value notifier is nothing more than a just one class that notifies values of a single value. It's just a single value. So value notifier is for single values. Provider is a widget that provides a class, or you can also pass a value, but it provides it to all the descendants. You provide it at one level, and all the widgets underneath it can have access to that. As opposed to value notifier, you can only use it within a single class, within a single widget, and it's only one single value that you're managing. Great. Flutter versus reactive. Sandeep, thank you for your question. So Flutter versus React Native. So I said reactive. I said React Native. So Flutter is again created by Google. React Native created by Facebook. Though they're very different in the way that they handle the information and how they process, how they build their applications. Flutter uses Dart. React Native uses HTML and JavaScript. Flutter doesn't use a JavaScript bridge because it compiles natively using Dart, the programming language Dart, and it compiles directly into native code. While React Native, you build it in HTML and JavaScript, uses the JavaScript bridge to transpile all that JavaScript into the native components of the specific platform, and it's a little bit more bloated than Flutter. Flutter, I like it because you paint every pixel on the screen. It gives you more flexibility in creating your components, as opposed to React Native, that every component in React Native maps to a native component in the specific platform. The good thing about Flutter is that you can make any component look like any component, and you can be in any platform and you can just paint your widgets. So that's why I'm a proponent of Flutter. Nothing against React, but it's just that I like more Flutter because it's more flexible, allows me to be productive much quicker as well, and I can build like great stuff with Flutter, and has a vibrant community. And I love the fact that I can make with one single code base amazing experiences for all platforms in general. So thank you for your question. Any other questions from the audience? Again, I love your questions, guys. Thank you so much. You guys have been amazing. Andrila, again, thank you so much for reaching out. So yes, I'm here for you guys. And if you guys have any other questions. You're welcome, Anurag. And again, thank you so much. Keep following me on Twitter, YouTube, and everywhere that I am. I invite you, not only you, Anurag, Sandeep, everybody in here who has questions, you, Andrila, any other events that I have, they're always free. And I'm always, sharing my knowledge about Flutter because, again, I don't keep any secrets. My applications are built exactly the same way that I just showed you right now. And I'm just happy to share my knowledge. So thank you.
So, sir, as of now, I don't see any more questions.
Mhm.
But it was very nice having you here, and for this amazing session.
Yes.
And the one thing which I would like to point out is, you kept on maintaining the same level of energy from the very
Thank you.
beginning to the
Thank you.
end of
Thank
the
you.
session. And I guess all the attendees would say the same thing. So thank you, sir. And Yeah. So I guess we can wrap up our session now.
Yes. Again, like I said, I would love to be invited again in the future, and I hope to see you guys soon. Wish you all luck in your Flutter learning journey. Andrilla, you have a great potential ahead of you. I hope that you become a GDE cloud because you're amazing. So thank you so much for the invitation, and I hope to stay in touch with everybody. So see you soon, guys. Thank you so much. Let's stay in touch.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye bye.